We begin this hour with the latest in the war between Israel and Hamas. This morning, Israel's conduct in that war has been before the International Court of Justice. The first day of opening arguments is over now. South Africa detailed its allegations of genocide against Israel.
Despite the horror of the genocide against the Palestinian people being live streamed from Gaza to our mobile phones, computers, and television screens, the first genocide in history where its victims are broadcasting their own destruction in real time in the desperate, so far vain hope that the world might do something.
Israel will make its case tomorrow. The International Court of Justice is the top court for the United Nations, and this hearing is just the first step in the process to weigh the genocide allegations. It could take years overall. In the meantime, South Africa is seeking a provisional order from the World Court for Israel to stop its military actions in Gaza immediately. That ruling could come within weeks. The case has wide implications, both for countries like Canada and the United States, which support Israel, and for the nations that have been increasingly critical of the way Israel is conducting the war. Abby Kugathasan is going to lead off our coverage this hour. As mentioned, Abby, this is a two-day hearing. South Africa has completed its arguments. There's a news conference going on the steps of the World Court where it's essentially reiterating the kinds of arguments that we heard over the last 3 hours at The Hague. What transpired today?
Well, we already had this 84-page case that was presented by South Africa, and this morning we heard their 3-hour presentation where essentially South Africa is accusing Israel of committing genocide against the Palestinian people. And while this is certainly about the decades-long suffering of the Palestinian people under Israeli occupation, there was absolutely a heavy focus today on what Israel is doing to the people of Gaza following Hamas's attacks and the taking of Israeli hostages on October 7th, which South Africa did condemn. Now, the legal team outlined various ways in which Israel is violating the 1948 Genocide Convention. That includes the displacement of 85% of the population and the mass killing of Palestinians. Here's what one of the lawyers had to say about that.
Israel has killed an unparalleled and unprecedented number of civilians, with the full knowledge of how many civilian lives each bomb will take. More than 1,800 families, Palestinian families in Gaza, have lost multiple family members, and hundreds of multi-generational families have been wiped out.
She also talked about how Israel is deliberately imposing conditions which make life unsustainable for people, meant to bring about their physical destruction. She referred to destroyed infrastructure that includes health facilities. She also said Israel has prevented sufficient food, water, and electricity from entering Gaza. Now, the main case on whether Israel is committing genocidal acts or not, the final ruling could take years, as you said. But what South Africa is looking to achieve right now in the short term is to prove to the court that the court should order multiple provisional measures in the meantime to ensure that the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, Heather, doesn't get even worse.
Abby, one of the things for the World Court to consider is intent, often very difficult to prove. How could intent figure in things there?
Genocide is exceptionally difficult to prove because intent is difficult to prove. International law requires proof of intent. Here's a lawyer in Ireland who explains that a bit more.
The test is that if you are inferring genocidal intent from all these different elements that you might look at, ethnic cleansing, other types of attacks, destroying infrastructure, and so forth, genocidal intent has to be the only reasonable inference that can be drawn from that pattern of conduct.
Now, the lawyer tasked with showing intent at The Hague today, Tembega Nogutobi, said there is an extraordinary feature in this case because they can refer to public statements that were made by Israeli government officials that he says highlight genocidal intent. He started with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu speaking to IDF soldiers and making a biblical reference linked to a command from God for the retaliatory destruction of an entire group. The lawyer also spoke about Israel's defense minister, Yoav Gallant, who called for a total siege of Gaza, our viewers may remember, very early in the war. Now, this team has compiled 9 pages of comments made by senior Israeli officials. The lawyer says this language has trickled down to IDF soldiers who are using that language on the ground in Gaza as they post videos on social media. Israel will have its chance to speak tomorrow. We can expect its lawyers to argue that the IDF only targets Hamas, not civilians, but to also draw on the right of self-defense. We did hear, though, from the South African High Commissioner to Canada on Power and Politics last night. He said the right to self-defense doesn't apply here, given that Israel is invoking it against Palestinian territories that it occupies, Heather.
Abby, thank you very much.